I just may have the perfect paint finish for an imperfect piece of furniture. Hi, I'm Denise from Salvaged Inspirations and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm playing around with a thrifted Tristan pottery box cube, and I'm using a new technique to me and playing with some clay paint. So just let me get set up and I'll be right back. Here's the PotteryBarn Tristan cube I found selling at my local restore for $7.99. It seriously wasn't in the best condition. A lot of scratches, a lot of nicks and holes. But because we've been having so many snowstorms here, I did not want to lug a large piece of furniture through the snow. So this thrift find was the perfect size to bring home, and it gave me the opportunity to try a perfect paint technique for an imperfect piece of furniture. I started by giving this piece a really good cleaning on the inside and outside. I also flipped it over to make sure I got all the cobwebs and dirt off the bottom of this piece as well. When using Terra clay paint, they have a designated cleaner called Terra Clean. However, I used my all-purpose White Lightning, which is a TSP substitute. Once it was all clean and 100% dry, I brought the box or cube into my sanding room. And using my Bosch palm sander, I went ahead with a 220 grit and gave the cube a really good sanding. I wasn't trying to sand it down to remove all the scratches and the dings because this is very soft wood. I would have had to sand down a lot. And I knew I was going to put a textured paint finish on this. So this sanding was just to make a really good scuff sanding to remove the original finish, which this box is so old, there's not much of the finish left on there, but I just wanted to scuff it up so the clay paint would adhere properly. For the rounded edges and the feet, I took a sanding pad, which is nice and flexible. This is a medium grit, so I believe it's about a 180. I took a medium grit sanding pad and it curves around the edges and the feet really nicely. So this makes a scuff sanding super easy. After the entire piece was fully scuff sanded, I took my dollar store brush, removed any of the dust, and then checked out what actually needs to be covered and disguised. And again, there were a lot of scratches, holes, dings in this piece. I brought it back into my paint room, put down a drop cloth, and flipped it over. I went through my would you bend stash because I thought the front of this cube really needed some interest. It needed a focal point. And I found these two beautiful scrolly would you bend moldings. However, one of them had broken into 3 or 4 individual pieces. But no worries. Would you bend is fabulous and so easy to work with. So even if you have broken would you bend, it's very easy to piece together, puzzle together, and glue together, and you'll just see how seamless this looks in a moment. I started with the little keyhole molding, and using my heat gun, I just heat the wood you bend up until it's pliable. Once it's nice and pliable, I went ahead and added some wood glue to the back using an artist brush. I centered it over the hole in the box and then heated it up with my heat gun once again just to adhere that glue nicely. I played around and decided with the placement of these would you bend moldings. And then again, like I said, I had to kind of piece together the one broken one just to make sure that everything looked okay. When I finally decided on a design, I went ahead and glued down the first piece of wood you bend that was actually all intact. And for the second one, again, like I said, I heated it up and I started puzzling it together. It was a little tricky to get the angle just right because I was working with individual pieces, but the key to getting the wood you bend to look seamless again is to heat it up and kind of squish it together once you have the glue on it. And then you won't even see the crack in the wood you bend because it's pliable. You can just kind of squeeze it together and it goes back together very, very nicely, especially after it's painted. While the glue was still wet, I took out a ruler just to make sure that my design was centered nicely. And while the glue is still wet under the wood you bend, it is movable. You can remove it, you can move it around. Just be sure to do all this before it dries because once it's dry, it is stuck on there. Now that I had a focal point on the front of this piece, I cleaned off the excess glue, and now it was time for paint. I used a tack cloth to remove any of the dust left on from the sanding, and then grabbed this Terra clay paint in Laney's Lagoon. My vision was to create a lot of texture with some color variation to hide all the flaws in this piece. And I had actually used clay paint once before on this wine box, which I'll share on the screen, and it turned out beautiful. So that was a good build my confidence project to try something a little larger, such as this box. Terra clay paint is an artisan paint, so you can really get creative. It has low VOCs, it's very pigmented, it can be reactivated with water before sealing, and I just wanted to mention this paint does not self-level. So if you're after a smooth finish, this wouldn't be the best choice. Or maybe I should say it wouldn't be the easiest paint for you to use if you're looking for a super smooth finish. But it does blend beautifully, it textures beautifully. You can do so many creative finishes with this. I gave this clay paint a really good mixing, and then I poured some out on a paper plate. I also just wanted to mention if there was a slick factory finish still on here, or if I was worried about any sort of bleed through or adhesion problems, I would have used a primer. But seeing as this was scuff sanded, there's no finish on it, I'm not worried about any bleed through, I just went ahead and applied the Terra paint right over this finish. I used my Big Daddy all natural bristle brush. They do recommend an all natural bristle brush, especially if you're looking for texture, because then you can just pounce it on and put it on randomly, as I'm doing here on the front of the box. And isn't this color fun? This color is really, really bright and beautiful. With all the gray weather outside and all the snow, I think I just needed a bright color to cheer me up. I kept going with this Laney's Lagoon and making it textured. So I just pounced it up and down. I would brush it any which way. There was no rhyme or reason on how to put this on because, again, I was trying to cover all the imperfections. Here's me pouncing it on the feet, and I hope you can see the texture that this is creating. This will not level out, just so you know. If you paint it on with texture, that's exactly the way it's going to stay. For the second textured layer, I added this beautiful green. Using the same large brush and a spray mister bottle because I wanted it thicker in some areas, lighter in others, and I do not want to cover the whole box in this green. I went ahead and I pounced some of this beautiful green over the Laney's Lagoon. Now here's the ugly part. I will admit it, this looks scary, but I always keep in mind that it is just paint. Really, there's nothing to be scared about. Even if I wanted to blend all this together with clay paint, I could just wet it down and blend it all, and you can just have fun with it. So there's no right or wrong. And when I'm trying a new technique, I just try to go with it. So I worked my way around the entire box, leaving some of the Laney's Lagoon poking through, adding more texture with this dark green, using the water mister bottle to make the paint lighter in some areas, darker in others, and just having fun with it. For my last layer, I used the clay paint in wheat. And this time I changed up brushes. Now they recommend using a all natural bristle brush, but this one is my synthetic oval. And the reason why I did that was because I wanted it to start looking a little more muted, a little softer. And I found using a synthetic brush gave it that softer look. Again, there's no steadfast, hard set rules when it comes to painting. If you're gonna do an artistic finish, have fun and experiment with it. I should also mention that I did let each coat dry before I went on to the next color. And my very last color was called Desert Tan in the Terra clay paint. And this Desert Tan is a beautiful neutral. So I used my synthetic brush, and this time I gave it more a smooth painted on finish to cover all those layers. Now, because there was so much texture underneath, This is still a very textured finish, which I'll show you some close-ups afterwards. But I wanted to kind of even everything out just so you get the different layers kind of hinting coming through the desert tan. Once I had finished painting on the desert tan, the full box, I went ahead and used my heat gun to start drying it. And you can see how the clay paint actually dries differently. The colors look different. I would say more clay, is that a word? More clayey than they do when they're wet. After it was 100% dry, I wanted to seal it, and I used Terra Seal to do this. I put on 3 very, very light coats, sanding in between each coat very lightly. And you can see the difference of the dry clay paint and then how it changes when you add the Terra Seal on top of it. Now, this won't stay this color, of course, because once it dries up, it's going to look very, very matte once again. But you can see all the different layers and colors coming through. And I think mission accomplished, because as I was top coating, I really didn't see all those scratches and all those holes and all those nooks and crannies. This textured paint technique is a great way to hide all those imperfections. After the top coats were 100% dry, I went back with a bronze gilding wax and I started highlighting the Would You Bend moldings. I think I was having a little too much fun with the gilding wax, so I decided to do the feet as well. And while I was at it, why not do the lip of the entire box too? This gilding wax is oil-based, so it does not need top coating, but the entire box does need dry time, and the total cure time would be between 3 and 4 weeks. So I would say between 21 and 30 days. So I brought everything upstairs, gave it a little style, and here we go. Here's the before. And here's the after. I can't wait to hear what you think. So I hope this textured paint technique has inspired you to go try something different. If you're ever curious about a technique or a different brand of paint, just do it. Thank you so much for being here with me today. Feel free to like and subscribe. You can also find me over at salvagedinspirations.com, where I have a free email list that you can sign up for, and it'll keep you updated on all the new projects. Have a fabulous week, guys. Bye.